Customer Commerce Podcast, where technology's fast and biz is a blast.
In life and in business, time is precious. It's why customers stay or leave and why businesses succeed or fail. We're here to give a voice to everything that makes business, whether as a customer or as a CEO, easier and more rewarding. Welcome to the Customer Commerce Podcast. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Customer Commerce Podcast. I'm Jess, your host, and in today's episode, we have a featured guest, Jason Greenwood. Jason is a seasoned e-commerce strategist and the founder of Greenwood Consulting, a firm dedicated to helping B2B brands navigate their digital transformation journeys. With over 20 years of experience in the e-commerce industry, Jason has seen firsthand the unique challenges that manufacturers, wholesalers, and distributors face as they strive to capitalize on the growing demand for online commerce. Recognizing that B2B brands often receive less attention than their B2C counterparts, he's created Greenwood Consulting to provide tailored advisory services that empower these businesses to achieve operational and customer experience excellence. Through his Fit for Commerce framework, Jason helps companies streamline their digital operations, select right technology, and ensure successful adoption of new solutions, all while minimizing risks and surprises. Today, Jason is a trusted voice in the industry, known for his deep expertise and commitment to driving success for his clients. And with me to welcome him to the podcast is Store Connect's CEO and founder, Michael Linzar. I have to be honest, before we begin, you'll hear me mention how we like to keep the episodes short and sweet, of a time frame of around 30 minutes. However, Jason really delved into some of the common mistakes business owners get themselves into with e-commerce when they come to him, and he really gives it to you quite simple and truthful, but we do go on for a little bit more than 30 minutes. So while he was on a roll, there was just no way I was going to stop him. In saying that, I eventually did, but he has promised us another visit in the near future, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, enjoy this episode, and remember you can always reach out to us at getstoreconnect.com for any feedback or questions you'd like answers to on the podcast in the field of commerce. This podcast is for you to go out and get the knowledge and tools to create a successful business and life. So without further ado, here is the episode. Enjoy. All right, we are in 3 different time zones. So I will say good morning, Michael. Good afternoon, Jason. And good evening to myself.
Thank you. Sounds good to me.
The wonders of the modern internet, hey? We've got literally Europe, America, and Australia all on a call together.
Well, actually, Mexico in my case. North America, but I live in Mexico. So, yeah, I live in Puebla now. So,
who would have thought? If only the people from 100 years ago could see us now.
I know, exactly. They couldn't have dreamt of it. They would have thought this was some ghost in the machine thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jason, you're not too new to the Store Connect family. I mean, you were just recently interviewing Michael on your podcast, the E-commerce Edge podcast, which I believe you have. I was looking at it. It's like over 400 episodes.
Yeah, it is a little crazy. Who would have thunk it, 4 years ago or whenever it was, I started doing this podcast thing pretty hardcore. And now I'm up to 3 episodes a week I release. And Michael's episode was a very popular one. And who would have thought that talking about Salesforce e-commerce would have been sexy? But, we pulled it off somehow, some way.
I'm sexy and I know it.
Well, I think you guys are going to geek out a little bit throughout this episode. Like Michael was saying before we press record, it's going to be very free flow. We never really know what's going to come up in these episodes, but that's kind of the fun of it. And I think a lot of little gems, or as I like to call poddy nuggets, not potty nuggets, which our branding extraordinaire David kept mishearing what I was saying.
Yes.
So while you may know a lot about Michael, I think we're now it's the spotlight's on you, but just to let you guys know, the floor is open. The questions that I have written are very, well, for you both. Michael, you'll have things to say. Jason, you'll have things to say. If you guys want to talk a bit, together, that's great, but I'll be here just in the corner. listening.
You'll be moderating. You'll keep us on the straight and narrow, is what you're saying, Jessica.
Exactly. That's
I like
exactly
that.
right.
I like that. We need some guidance. You know, I tell my
Well,
my wife that all the time. I'm very happy to have her direction whenever I can get it. So yeah,
I mean,
she's
that's
amazing.
kind of a job of a female to just
Yeah,
put them in line, you know?
Keep the men in
completely
line.
agree.
That's right.
Exactly. So for these episodes, they're 30 minutes with lots of information, mainly for small business owners in particular to feel inspired, confident enough to make some decisions, because obviously the big wide world web is so giant that it can bring a lot of opportunities, but I feel like also a lot of overwhelm. So people kind of almost don't make decisions. So they kind of just like listen to a lot of stuff, but don't start. So I want to start with this question, which is what I'm going to start with Jason first. What's the earliest moment you can remember that comes to mind when you really noticed the explosion of the e-commerce demand impacting B2B, D2C brands? And what were you doing at that time? And what were your thoughts on it? Like when you just noticed, holy shit, like we're going into something. Where were you and what were you thinking at that moment?
It was at the start of the pandemic, and it was right after the first lockdowns had started in Australia and New Zealand, and they started at about the same time in the world. Your audience probably knows that New Zealand and Victoria in particular were two of the most locked down places in the entire world during COVID.
Yeah.
And a lot of B2B brands, I was still working agency side. I was inside an agency, building an agency with a very good friend of mine called Mustache Republic. And we started at the very beginning of the lockdowns. Every single project, without exception, that we were working on at that time got put on hold because nobody knew exactly what was going to happen. They didn't know whether the world was going to end. They didn't know whether people were going to stop buying. They didn't know whether people were going to stop buying online. And then literally within 4 weeks of that, not only did all the projects come back on stream, but they said, now we want them faster than we had planned before because we have more demand than we know what to do with coming out our ears from a digital commerce perspective. And we had a lot of B2B brands come to us at that time that had no digital play at all. We're talking, they didn't do EDI, they didn't do punch out, they didn't do self-service e-commerce. They had like a physical sales team and like customer service. And I really started to sense then that the tide was turning and that this decade behind that most B2B brands were behind their D2C and B2C counterparts from a digital maturation perspective, they were all trying to catch up in the span of months instead of years. And it was like, wow, okay, these brands finally realize with this pandemic and with those that are likely to follow, if we don't have digital routes to market, we're kind of screwed. And we are not prepared to have like 90% of our transactions in business come through digital channels. We're just not set up to handle that. And it's all fine and good that we can have Zoom calls with our customers and all that sort of stuff, but we are just not ready for this whole digital thing. And a lot of their customers were asking for it at that time in particular. They said, don't come and visit us on site. Don't come to our job sites. Don't come to our offices.
Because it's illegal.
Yeah, because you can't. But just don't. We'll send carrier pigeon orders across, or we'll send you an email, or we'll send you a fax. And surprisingly, the vast majority of those B2B brands that came to us at that time, they were still taking a significant percentage of their orders via fax machine. And I was because the bulk of my career prior to that had been heavily focused on B2C and D2C. I was not quite fully aware just how behind most of the B2B world was in comparison to B2C and D2C until that moment. And I just remember I remember getting off a call with a prospect and them saying, we're panicked over here. We need to get something up and running fast. I remember thinking, man, this has got to be a bigger problem than just this one merchant. And I think the floodgates have just opened on an entirely new opportunity. And when I went consulting after I finished up and basically sold out of that agency, I thought, if I just become another D2C or B2C consultant, it's 100% red ocean. Everybody and their dog says that they're a D2C consultant, but there are very, very few specialists in the B2B space. And I had some deep experience on some very complex, complex architectural projects, and I loved them because my background has been heavily tech and ops focused right throughout the whole of my career, and that fits the B2B world so damn well. Because in the B2C and D2C world, oftentimes these big projects, they're led by marketing and they're owned by marketing, right? And everything's got to be pixel perfect, and it's all about how you feel, and it's form over function in many cases, and they don't have the big enough budget to do what they want to do, and it's all about cutting corners, and it's how can we do this quick? And in the B2B world, it's very much function over form. It is, most of these projects are led by operators. They're led by the sales team, they're led by IT, they're led by COO, they're led by operators in the business. And as a result of that, they need functionality, and they need it quickly, and they need it efficient for them, and they need it efficient for the customer. And so that's your question. It was a long-winded way of saying I can remember exactly when I thought at the beginning of COVID, holy shit, these B2B brands are in deep, deep trouble because they've completely ignored digital for probably, in many cases, their entire life as a company. And when we were getting contacted as an agency, it was oftentimes the grandchild of the founder of the company that was reaching out to us because they were moving into a leadership position in the business. They're digital natives, but their parent and grandparent was not digital native. And they were like, we've been tasked with modernizing our business. And it's like, what the hell do we do? So I can remember those feelings at that time.
When you said before that these businesses were panicked, we need to do something now, I think there was two key points there that you said that I want to dig in on a bit. The first one was they were panicked and they need a solution now. How did you, as you've evolved your consultancy and now you're a B2B consultant, I really feel that the entire B2B industry is almost in an analysis paralysis on this subject. Like they've got so many options now. I think actually the way I actually found you was you did a LinkedIn post of like the top 350 or some ungodly number of B2B pieces of software, right? And I'm like, StoreConnect's missing off this list. And you're like, well, what the hell is StoreConnect?
Yeah.
And, that it just blew me away that there's so much choice. How does anyone navigate this? Yeah. I mean, do they have to hire you? I mean, obviously this isn't a pitch for you, but is that the only way, or is it luck? I mean, what do you recommend they even try and do here? You're not going to evaluate 50 items.
Yeah, I think that the one consistent challenge that I run into before we even start thinking about the tech, because I work from the customer experience that those brands are trying to create and work backwards to the technology. And the technology is oftentimes one of the last considerations. And 95+% of the time, their product data and their customer data is not in any state to sell across digital channels. It's when I go in and I do my discovery and I get my 150 questionnaire out and I send it to them in advance, and then we have our follow-up workshops, and I'm starting to dig into their current state and what systems do they have, what processes do they use. In many cases, their data is so far from being ready that we actually have to do some data engineering and some data work first before we can even start thinking about the type of experience they want to create for their customers.
We just had that with one of our clients. They signed up for StoreConnect, I think, a year and a half ago. The project was slated to take 2.5 months of work. They spent 13 months just getting their data set right. And they were already selling B2B. Like they already had an e-commerce site, but it just didn't have the data they needed. So 13 months of data entry.
Yep.
Just to get it to a point where they could then start the project that they wanted to start. That's very common.
And I see 6 months being the norm, circa 6 months for most of the B2B brands that I start consulting with. They will usually need 6 to 12 months worth of data cleansing, and also bringing consistency to their data, because they might have a ton of data, but for some categories of products, they might have a proper parent-child relationship with their variants. In other categories, they're all sold as individual items, even though they should be variants. They've got no consistency across their catalog. Some products have incredible structured product data. Some products have no structured product data. Some products have images. Some products have no images. Some products have spec sheets. Some products have no spec sheets. And especially where in the B2B industry, a lot of products, the specs matter, because if I'm looking at a t-shirt and I'm a D2C customer, I'm picking it visually based on what I like the look of in many cases over the attributes of the product. In the B2B world, many products, the differentiating factor is the specs of those products. And so if I'm looking at 3 pumps and they physically look exactly the same, but they've got different input diameters, output diameters, flow, head, handling capability, wattage of output, liters per hour or minute, whatever it might be. So in those cases, I can't differentiate those products based on how they look. They might look exactly the same. And so those types of structured product data components for my buyers to be able to find exactly what they're looking for on your website and be able to filter down to that product rapidly that will meet their specific application needs. This is a real challenge in the B2B world, because a lot of this information is tied up in sales reps' heads. It's tied up in physical print catalogs from the manufacturers. It's tied up on network drives, scattered across network drives, where the sales rep knows exactly which subdrive and which subdirectory to go to pull out the exact spec sheet that their customer is asking for via email. And then they send it off to them as an info pack. So these are the types of challenges that are just so common that I'm literally running into every single day. To answer your question, when I go in or before I go in, where these brands would be best to start is by looking at their own data to begin with. Even before they hire me, I can help them, and I can help them organize and structure that data if they want me to. But oftentimes they've got the ability to do it internally. It's just they've never allocated any time, energy, or resource to doing it. And especially these B2B brands, in many cases, their catalogs start at like 50,000 SKUs. It's
Yeah.
in the B2C and D2C world, a 50,000 SKUs catalog is big. It's huge, right? In the B2B world, a 50,000 SKU catalog is relatively small, especially if you're a distributor.
Or a manufacturer.
Or a manufacturer. These distributors and manufacturers oftentimes will have 500,000 SKUs, 1 million
Or more.
SKUs, 5 million SKUs. And so in that scenario, they need help. And there are also third-party data services that can help them as well. There are specific third-party B2B product data services that have access to these catalogs from the manufacturer, and also there are, in addition to those services, many of them also bring in AI into the equation to help organize that data, to pull it out of, to do character recognition out of PDFs and pull data out and map it to the right data sets and to the right attribute sets. So there are services out there that can help, but until they recognize that there's a problem with their data, we can't make even a start at getting it fixed. And that's a real challenge.
Yeah, I mean, speaking on the number of SKUs, I was on the call to a prospect yesterday that does manufacturing of a certain type of product, and they have maybe 10 products, but each of those products has 300 options, which then have a knock-on effect of 200 options, which have a knock-on effect of 50 options. So you end up with 10 million SKUs.
Yes.
And possible ways to sell the product, right? And it's mind-blowing when you really get into it, and this is where, it really resonates with me that you have to get your own house in order before you present it to the world. And I was just about to ask you about AI assistants, and you read my mind. Thank you. That was great. But this underlying challenge of you got to get your data right. It's so critical in this B2B world. You can't, if I'm selling a t-shirt and this is the fabric, this is a sample of our next shirt, people go, yeah, I like that orange. It doesn't really matter if it's 20% polyester or it's 15% poly. If you get that wrong and an AI bot comes in and puts a slightly wrong description, okay, you refund a t-shirt, right? You do it wrong in B2B, it might be the foundational support of a building.
Yes.
And people are going to die. It's like you can't just skimp on this stuff. It's really important.
Why don't these businesses know this before? Like, why don't you think they know? Like one of our clients is Beyond Plumbing Australia, and they are 3 guys that just got camping chairs together and said, right, we're going to build a business. and they've been doing amazing, but they've admitted themselves like they are not IT guys whatsoever. And I feel like a lot of people that go, yeah, let's get into e-commerce, let's build a website, let's make t-shirts, let's get these prints. It's more about the product and the experience of it and what they get to, the journey of it, rather than the IT side, the tech side. I feel like that's a big surprise to business owners. What's missing before they come to you? Is there like a course? Is there like a basic, list of almost like nomenclature, like words that they need to understand and get? What do you think is missing that just skips them to go, oh, here we are, and we don't have anything?
I guess, another way to say that would be, what would be the magic wand you would wave, Jason, to
Thank
help
you,
B2B
Michael.
customers worldwide? Like, what would you do?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, it's, if you were to ask these plumbers, for example, if I wanted to become a plumber, and I wanted to become a good plumber, and I wanted to become a certified plumber that was accredited, what would I need to do? What trade school would I need to go to? What qualification would I need to get? How long is it going to take me? Is it a 2-year degree? Is it a 4-year degree? How long is my apprenticeship going to be? Is it 1 year? Is it 5 years? And they would tell you down to the nth degree. They'd say, go to this tech school. This is the best plumbing school. This is how long it's going to take you. This is how much it's going to cost you. Then you're going to need to do 3 years of apprenticeship under somebody like me. And then I'm going to sign it off. And then eventually 6 years down the track, you're going to pop out the other side and you're going to be a plumber or a drain layer or whatever it is, right? But it's crazy. And I see this every single day on Reddit. I spend a tremendous amount of time on Reddit. I spend a tremendous amount of time on LinkedIn answering questions exactly like this, Jessica. And it blows my mind how many people think that going into e-commerce doesn't take as much training, doesn't take as much time, doesn't take as much care, concern, love, attention to detail, doesn't take as much education, doesn't take as much trial and error, doesn't take as much getting your hand slapped, when you do something wrong. That they think that anybody can go and just open up a Shopify store and go selling, and then they'll figure it out as they go along. It absolutely blows my mind that people that are qualified in a trade, or you get a lawyer coming to you, or you get a doctor coming to you, or whatever, and they say, look, I want to do this e-commerce thing. How hard could it be? It's like, well, shit, how hard was becoming a lawyer? Shit, how hard was becoming a doctor? Why is it that e-commerce, for some reason, gets a pass on, or an expected pass on, the difficulty of the learning curve to be good at it? Right. And so that's when people come to me and they act like that, I say, well, how long did it take you to get good at what you do?
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 24 years and I still don't know everything. So the reality is, you're not going to learn it overnight, and there's not any one book. There's probably 100 books, and there's no one podcast. There's probably 100 podcasts. And so I now have in my text file, I have got links to 20 top podcasts and some other resources. And I literally just go into Reddit every single day and I copy and paste this list of resources over and over and over again for people that are trying to get into e-commerce, or already in e-commerce. They've set up a Shopify store, and 3 weeks later, they've spent $10,000 on meta advertising and not converted a single customer. And they say, why? And I say, you need to learn. Or go and work for somebody who's crushing it, who's doing a great job. Work as an apprentice inside that e-commerce business so that you can see the inner workings of how to build these businesses and make them successful. Learn the craft before you decide to go out and do it on your own. Or simply treat it as an incredible learning curve that's probably still going to be cheaper than your local university degree. And it's probably still going to be faster than the 4 or 8 year degree that you're thinking about going and getting. So you learn either by trial and error, or you learn from experts, or some combination of the two.
And really, like, consultants like yourself shortcut that experience to a degree. But
Correct.
If the client's not willing to, like, you cannot, as a consultant, run their B2B practice. Like,
Yes.
They're going to have to get up to a point where they're managing that themselves, and they've taken that information in and internalized it, because otherwise there's no way it could be profitable.
And a lot of what I do is, before we even get into the solution architecture side and the platform search and select side and the implementation partner search and select side, I'm helping them with organizational design. I'm helping them with digital process design. I'm helping them with their data design. I'm helping them really start to understand why we even need some of the technology that I will be recommending at some point in the future, I start to help them understand the mechanics of digital commerce, to help them understand the mechanics of organizing data, the mechanics of some of the things they're going to have to do as a business. And interestingly enough, even simple things like SEO, which are completely foreign to the B2B world, or historically have been very foreign to the B2B world, when you help them understand the benefits of ungating their e-commerce experience, for example, where historically in the B2B world, you couldn't even see what somebody carried unless you authenticated. You couldn't, without logging in, you couldn't see their catalog, you couldn't see their pricing, you couldn't see their inventory, you couldn't see anything, you couldn't see MOQs, nothing. Right. And I say, well, look, and B2Bs have historically played their cards very close to their chest because they think their unique catalog is what differentiates them, or they think their pricing or the inventory that they carry is a differentiator, and they don't want to tell their friends, and they don't want competitors to see what they carry. It's a very closed mindset in the B2B world because we have a lot of monopolies historically that have existed in the B2B world. And now the world is opening up and they're seeing more competition than ever before. And so they think their secret sauce is their catalog. They think their secret sauce is maybe Joe, the sales rep, or Jill, the sales rep. And when in actuality, that's oftentimes not the differentiating factor anymore, though they think it is. And one of the things I tell them is, look, 61% of B2B buyers in America today are millennials. They're not going to go to the Yellow Pages to find you. They are not going to go to a trade show to find you. That's not what they're going to do. They're going to start with a Google search. Manufacturer widget X, supplier widget X, wholesaler widget X, distributor widget X. They start their supplier search online today. It's not because the Good Old Boys Club told them that this is where you go to buy this light switch. That's not how it works today. And so these Good Old Boys Clubs, and, I think Michael and I can say this honestly because we fit into this club. The male, pale, and stale club of B2B is going away. And the elder generation are retiring, they're moving out, they're dying, and we've got a younger generation coming in both on the sell side and the buy side. And therefore the expectation around digital channels is very high now. And it's table stakes to be able to offer self-service e-commerce. And also in the B2B world, there's still an expectation that there's 3 primary sales channels that are digital, which is EDI, punch-out, and self-service e-commerce. And that's another complexity that a lot of B2B brands don't understand, is that if they want to be relevant to their buyers, then to their whale buyers, they're going to need to offer EDI. Otherwise, the whales won't.
And by EDI, you mean electronic data interchange. So being able to place an automatic order against your supply system or something. We're running out of widget X. We need 400 from this company Tuesday, right?
Yep.
And then
their ERP
punch
talking
out,
to my
can you
ERP.
define punch out for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's another very, very popular form of B2B buying, which is either you've got, as part of your ERP, you've got a e-procurement module within that platform, or a standalone e-procurement module, which allows you to procure goods from a B2B seller electronically. And what that does is that e-procurement system needs to have an integration to your catalog in some way. Usually it needs to connect to your e-commerce platform. It can occasionally connect to your PIM or your ERP, but usually it would prefer to connect to your e-commerce platform so that digitally it can pull down your catalog as well as your pricing into their e-procurement system, so that they can set you up as a preferred supplier, so that they can check your catalog availability, so they can check your pricing, all that sort of stuff, and so that they can set up that purchase request and PO directly in their e-procurement system. And then that comes directly via that punch-out pipeline, that punch-out integration directly into your e-commerce platform, and places that order digitally without them having to physically log in to your storefront through your web URL. And it's automatically connected digitally to their e-procurement system to make that very efficient, to make that buying and procurement process very efficient for them. And then there's the third cohort of your buyers, which will want to, and it's usually the SMB buyers, not always, but mostly the SMB buyers. They want to actually log into your e-commerce website and actually make that purchase, right? And what I also have to educate a lot of B2B sellers on is the fact that even if 80% of your business is coming today via EDI and or punch-out, there's likely an entire swathe of digital services that your customers want that you don't yet provide. And what I mean by that is they will have a buyer's portal that they would love to log into and track their orders from the time it leaves your warehouse to the time it arrives at theirs. There is an e-commerce portal or a digital trade portal that they would love to log into to make quote requests. There's a portal that they would love to log into to lodge return requests. There is a portal that they would love to log into to actually see the breadth of your catalog, check the MOQs, check their pricing. Even if they don't execute the buy now button, there's a portal that they would love to log into, to have access to be able to do these things, to be able to download invoices and reprint them, to see the current status of their credit limit, to interact with your business digitally, even if they are transacting through a different digital channel or through a sales rep or through a customer service rep. And that's what a lot of these brands don't understand. And when I go in, one of the things I'm often tasked with by them is to help them create an onboarding plan, both an internal and an external onboarding plan for this new shiny e-commerce website that we're going to build, because they haven't done the groundwork. They haven't had the conversation with their customers about whether their customers even want e-commerce and what e-commerce means to them. Because in the B2B world, you don't hear the term e-commerce. It hardly is ever used. That e-commerce word is hardly ever used in the B2B world. They use terms like trade portal, buyer's portal, digital portal. They will use all sorts of different terminology, both on the sell side and the buy side. And you may never hear the word e-commerce in the business. But if you don't know that and you aren't empathetic to your customers and what they expect from you digitally, then you'll get nowhere. And you'll see no adoption. You'll go spend $350,000 implementing this whiz-bang wow new system, and it'll never see any use and you'll never see any ROI. So I start talking about an adoption plan before I even start scoping a solution with my clients.
One of the things you said there about the channels is really interesting, because we've had a few B2B companies assume that the businesses are going to buy just as they would, forever. Like what you said about that, the old club of the referrals going away and it's being replaced by these new digital channels. I think there's a mistake there that can be made, though, in the B2B space, and I'd be interested to hear your opinion on this, is that one of the challenges, I'm actually almost ready to publish my book, Customer Commerce, and one of the challenges I go into that book is that businesses on the B2C side, and I also see this happening on the B2B side, have started or went down this path of trying to make their business operations more efficient at the sacrificial price of having a human relationship with their customer, assuming that the efficiency is purely the benefit of the customer as well. Like that, they sort of took this viewpoint of, well, if we make our business operations more efficient for us, that's going to benefit the customer, which is true to an extent, but you still need that customer interaction, that customer relationship. And I think there's a truism is you never sell to a business. You always sell to a person in the business, right? There's going to be a buyer's agent in that company, even of the biggest companies in the world, that likes you. And that's how you got your foot in the door, whatever the reason is, right? It might just be that your prices are cheapest, okay. But you still establish that relationship. And whether or not they keep buying from you is based on that relationship. Do you think there is a challenge of B2B companies trying to automate away the full sales process, and they might get some short-term gains, but they're going to lose something into the future? Like they'll lose this customer engagement, this customer experience?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. And in fact, I'd go one step further and say that when I first go in and I start consulting to B2B brands, usually, at least on the sales team's side, I'm considered the devil. So I go in and they're like, get the hell out of here. You are the biggest threat to our existence that's ever walked through the door.
Because you're going to take away those sales opportunities.
I'm going to take away their business. I'm going to take away their commission. I'm going to take away their named accounts, and I'm going to try to convert them to digital channels. And so when I get in there, I can see the laser stares around a table full of 25 hard charging sales guys and gals. And they're like, you're about ready to pick my pocket, aren't you? And it's like, and I usually only need 10 to 15 minutes with the sales team before I'm now their best friend. And so I am a massive advocate for freeing up salespeople to do what they do best, which is to build relationships instead of doing admin work. And what we find, and when I go in and I start doing an assessment, if they track time, and not every B2B business does track their sales people's time, but if they do, what we find, and especially if they bucketize that time into specific tasks and responsibilities, what we typically find is anywhere from 20 to 60% of a salesperson's time is spent on admin tasks that add zero value to the customer whatsoever. So we're talking tasks as simple as I've taken an order via an iPad and I come back to my office and I now have to key it into my ERP, or I have to now key it into my WMS, or I now have to search the network drive for this piece of information that my customer is asking me for. I have to pull it down off the network drive. I have to attach it to an email and I have to send it to Bob down the road. I have to, they want to place a quote request. So they send me a quote request via email. Now I have to push it into my internal ops team, see if we can, procure the product. I have to get a price for it. I got to talk to the CFO and I got to get a price for the item. I've got to figure out what point in the price list this item's got to sit at. And then I can finally push it out to Bob or Jane down the road. And what we find is that by automating and creating digital routes of data exchange for these processes and automating these processes, it actually frees up salespeople to have more time with their customer. It frees them to be able to go to more lunches, to go and give out more box seats and go to the rugby game, or it gives them more time to have a private dinner of their group of customers. It gives them more time to focus on the relationship aspect instead of the admin aspect. And that's what I want for salespeople. And I don't know a salesperson alive that likes admin. They hate it. They have to do it, but they hate it. Right. And so I'm like, I'm going to be your best friend. By the end of this 15-minute conversation, I'm going to be your best friend because I'm going to ask you to tell me all the things you hate about your job. I'm going to ask you to tell me the 51 things you do that adds zero value to your customer, but you have to do them just as part and parcel of being a sales rep. Right. You tell me, and I'm going to figure out a way to automate as much of this as possible and take away your pain so that you can enjoy working with your customers more. And I am going to go to bat for you with the owners or the leaders or the founders of this business. And I'm going to actually ask them to incentivize you more for the sales that come through digital channels, not less, because I know that in order for your customers to adopt these sales channels, you're going to have to do some hand holding to make that happen. You're going to literally have to go sit by their side for the first 1, 2, 3 orders through the website, this flash new thing that we're going to build. You're going to have to hand hold them. You're going to have to get them comfortable with this. You're going to have to push them to the website and encourage them to use it. And you should be incentivized for that because you get what you incent. And I get that because that's what salespeople live by. Right. And so these are the kind of conversations I'm having and I'm often the glue inside the business, and I'm the champion for digital services inside the business because leadership doesn't know how to have these conversations with sales teams. It doesn't know how to have these conversations with IT people. It doesn't know how to have these conversations with customer service. And in many cases, customer service actually feel like their value, even though they are not necessarily incentivized by commission, they feel really important in the business because in many cases, 50 to 60% of orders are put through the customer service team. People are ringing in, they're sending a live chat, they're sending an email. Where do those emails go? They go to customer service, and customer service is perpetually plugged into the ERP. They're pulling up information on behalf of the customer. They're plugging in orders. They're sending the order off the sales rep for final stamp of approval. They're the glue inside the business. And when you come in, they feel equally threatened sometimes because they're like, so you're basically going to replace us with a machine, right? And no, it's not. Again, I'm going to make your life better and easier because you now no longer have to live in a crappy ERP interface. You can now live in a proper commerce interface that's going to make your life and your customer's life better, right? And so it's about how can we get businesses comfortable with the idea of staff augmentation, not replacement. That's the key.
Mm. We've had that so many times with our clients, like with one of them that I think I mentioned on your podcast, they had 76 e-commerce stores in 4 countries, right? So having 4 staff doing nothing but trying to keep those sites up to date, they've now moved, I think it's up to 30 of those sites now, and it's one person for 1 hour a day keeping it running, 30 e-commerce sites in 4 countries. It's mind-blowing. We had another customer talking to us about they have a B2B site, does a lot of quoting, and they realized that their sales reps could take our point of sale system with them to go and visit customers and just ring up the order there and save 3 hours of transcription errors when they get back to the site. I think that's a really important point that you just made. B2B commerce is less about replacing your sales team with a way for your customers to order, and much more about getting you commerce fit as a business so that your existing team can sell twice as much, because all of that minutia has been taken out of their life, all of that administrative garbage that they're having to do and the errors and everything else that causes gets pulled out. And the smart B2B company shouldn't be looking to lower their sales expense. They should be looking how to increase their revenue. One of our clients just reported a 300% growth after properly implementing a B2B solution with Store Connect, right? And that's because their team's able to have all these customer relationships and it's driving in more business. And they're not worried about, did we track that order correctly through the portal? And the clients can just look on the website and see where their order is, and they're not having to call people. So it's not going to customer support. So it's not, I think it's a really, really profound point that you've made there. And I think a lot of people would behoove themselves to have a think about that, especially if they're in the B2B side.
Well, and you pointed out something that's really critical too, which is that in the B2B world, we have more hybrid sales channels than we do in the B2C and D2C world. And by hybrid, I mean Bob the seller, Jane the buyer. They oftentimes will be communicating via Slack. They'll be communicating via email. They'll be communicating via WhatsApp. They'll have many hybrid communication formats and channels that they'll be using. And Jane might actually she'll take a screenshot of what she wants to buy on her phone. She'll add it to the Slack, either to the Slack channel with her sales rep or on WhatsApp. She'll send this through, send me 500 of these, Bob, right? Now, once we've got digital sales channels up and running, right, we can now parse all of these digital communication channels. We can parse them. So if an email comes in and it's got a certain format and it's got a PO attached to it in a PDF form, we can now automatically pull that out of the email and we can shunt it into our digital commerce platform. We can with the right syntax, we can make sure, and with AI, we can read any message that comes in that's either a quote request or a sales and purchase request via Slack or via WhatsApp, and we can plumb these into our digital sales platforms. So the thing is that the B2B world is so hybridized that, even the whale customers that maybe buy 80% of their products via EDI, there's perhaps in some instances 20% of those purchases that still come through a PO that's attached to an email or a quote request or is sent through via a Slack channel or via DM, and via maybe even Facebook Messenger in some cases are, these sales reps are connected to their customers. And so I think this is something that is massively overlooked by the B2B community, is that there are many more hybrid sales channels where literally I have seen with some of my B2B customers, their customers will literally handwrite on a Post-it note what they want to buy. They'll write the SKU down. They will write the name down. They'll write the quantity down. They will take a photo of the Post-it note with their phone. They will post the picture of the Post-it note via WhatsApp and say, "Can you send me this, Bob?" This is so common in the B2B world that I think the B2C and D2C world kind of takes it for granted that this doesn't happen, because that's as antiquated as sending a physical check to someone. But that still happens in the B2B world, and it's up to
including
us,
the physical checks,
right? And e-checks and ACH and all the rest, that it's up to us, who are the architects and the consultants and the people trying to help these brands modernize. It's less about making sure that their customers now go down these fixed paths to purchase. It's about, how can we let them continue buying in all the ways they want to buy today, but how can we map that into a digital platform that makes that heavy lift so much easier for the seller? And this is the real challenge that I'm seeing out there in the market, because these digital hybrid sales channels are just everywhere. And I see it in every way, shape, and form you can possibly imagine. And in many cases, they just throw customer service bodies at this, and they have them manning the order email channel. They have them manning or womaning is womaning a word? Manning or womaning the WhatsApp channel or the Slack channel or whatever it is, and they just throw bodies at it. And they say, well, we know that a sales rep can handle manually entering 50 orders a day, with relatively low error rates. And then when we get up to the next block of 50 orders that come in via this channel, we're going to throw another body at it.
Mhm.
And so this is a real challenge, is scalability when B2B margins have never been thinner. And so these brands just simply can no longer afford to throw bodies at the scaling problem. So they have to throw technology at it. And they're finally starting to realize that.
One of our
Oh.
clients said that is the exact reason why they ended up shifting to our platform, was it was no longer profitable to grow.
And that's scary.
They
That's
couldn't
scary.
add any more brands because, you know, adding that one more distribution chain or distribution channel or brand meant that they had to add this many more staff across so many different areas that there's no way they could ever make enough profit to do it.
Well, I was talking to an industrial brand recently, and they work in the hygienic pumping and plumbing space. And they're a family-owned business, third-generation family-owned business. They're a several $100 million a year business. They've got 6 warehouse sites across the United States. They're massive, and they're a manufacturer and a distributor. And I find that most manufacturers I deal with are also distributors. So they manufacture maybe 20 or 30% of their catalog, and then like 60, 70% of their catalog they're a distributor for, so that they can go to market with a holistic solution, even if they don't manufacture 100% of the components. They go with a whole solution to the market. And they were anywhere, depending on the category of products and depending on the supplier, they were anywhere from 6 to 12 months behind taking on any new distribution partners, brands, or products, because they could not get the products enriched enough to sell across digital channels.
Yeah.
And so they had a whole merchandising team inside that was their full-time job was taking photos, scraping websites, pulling down PDFs from suppliers' websites, trying to copy and paste, trying to write the romance copy, all that sort of stuff. And, you know, with some of the third-party technology that's out there now, we would be able to automate like 80, maybe 90+% of the manual work that their merchandising team is doing today. We would be able to automate the vast majority of that. And in some cases, that additional 10%, depending on the product, there are third-party data suppliers that already have it fully enriched for those SKUs. Because if they're just a distributor of that product, they're not the only distributor of that product. And as a result of that, they are data suppliers to the distribution space for a lot of those products. And they would be able to simply bring it in directly into their PIM system, map it in, and they'd be up and running in 24 hours kind of thing, with a little bit of internal validation and testing. And it's just that they in many cases, they just do not know this technology exists in the market. They do not exist. They do not know
don't even know to think to ask if it
Correct.
exists.
Or they
it's
don't
so
even know
far
how to
outside of-
contextualize that question and say,
Yeah.
well, what would I even call that? You know, what would I even call that? And so these are the types of conversations I think that we're both lucky enough to be able to have with customers. And I do count it a privilege, right? I count it a privilege that I have been lucky enough in my career to have been exposed to some really hairy, scary, very big, very intimidating B2B projects over the years, to where I've been able to learn this industry really, really well, to where I do speak the language of B2Bs. Because, you know, something as simple as, you know, in the B2C world, it's called click and collect. In the B2B world, it's called will call. Okay. In you know, the B2C world is called e-commerce, and the B2B world is called a trade portal. In, you know, we just, everything about these businesses, it's a totally different language. It's a totally different world. And if you don't speak their language, they will never trust you. And so when I go in, I have to meet them where they are, right? Whilst also still retaining a vision of where they could go. And it's getting them fired up about that vision of where they could go. That's half of my job. It's evangelism is half of my job.
Amazing. Well, I was
Jess,
mic
I think
dropping
you asked a
before.
question 45 minutes ago. I think we just
Yeah, I
finished
know.
that first question, right?
No, but it's freaking incredible. I mean, like, I know it isn't a sales pitch, but it really is interesting. You know, if you're a small business owner listening, you're just like, oh, there are answers. There are people that really genuinely want to help me, not just sell, have this huge tech stack and be like, oh my God, I'm in debt and I don't know if I'm even producing anything whatsoever. And I love that, Michael, you mentioned like being commerce fit. Like that's essentially what you guys are, you know, with Store Connect, and Jason with your business, what we're doing. Like we're getting businesses commerce fit so that they can keep going for however long and actually stay viable, you know. But that is right. I asked one question. I had about 4
It happens all the time on this podcast. It's just that's
all the time.
the
I
way
don't
we
That's
know
roll.
okay. So
why
this is one of 3, one of 4, right? We're gonna have to do this
right.
again.
We'll be here until like tomorrow
Exactly.
night.
We're going to
midnight.
have to. Well, no, it's literally after midnight for me now. So I'm like, nah, I got to get to bed. But we will have to definitely have you back, Jason, because it's very fascinating. And I do have, more questions to ask. I guess one question to have like a takeaway that someone can have is there something that comes to mind of something that small businesses are focusing too much on that you're like, get rid of it? Like that they come to you and you're like, why is it such a common thing that businesses think that they need to focus on this when
I
it's a waste
think
of money or time?
Well, Michael, I think you said it best. There is a tremendous amount of navel gazing still happening in the B2B community. And, they might not have all the answers, but until they take the first step, they can't take the second step, which means they can't take the third step. And so I think whether it's reaching out to me, reaching out to you guys, reaching out to anybody who kind of works in this B2B space to at least have a dialogue. I don't know any consultant, agency, vendor. I don't know anybody out there who charges for a first meeting, like for a meet and greet, answer some questions, grill us, challenge us, just trying to get your bearings where this whole industry is at, where the technology maturity curve is at, where the price points are at for some of these technologies. Just start the dialogue at the very, very least. Reach out to somebody and maybe have one conversation a week for 3 months, right? And by the end of that 3 months, you're going to have a much clearer picture of what the opportunity looks like for your business from a digital commerce or digital enablement and digital services layer perspective. You're going to know so much more than you do today, but it requires an element of humility. It requires an element of somebody being willing to say, well, I don't know what I don't know. So I don't even know the questions to ask. I need to talk to someone who can at least point me in the right direction. And I just think that you have to start somewhere, right? A journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first footstep. I think that's a platitude. It's exactly the same with B2B commerce. You have to start somewhere. And if you don't know, and surprisingly, there are actually, in almost all cases, when I go into these businesses, there's someone or a group of people in the business that want to take this on. They want to own it. They could be in logistics. They could be in finance. It doesn't matter where they are in the business today, but they know the business and they know B2B inside and out. But they want to do the commerce thing. They want to understand that. They want to get upskilled and trained, and they really have a passion for that, but they don't know where to start. So I would say look internally first to see if there's anybody inside the business that really kind of wants to own this and run with it and ask all the questions and act like the idiot and go and meet people and DM people on LinkedIn and everything else. You probably have someone inside the business that wants to do that already. It's just about empowering them to do that and have those conversations so they can come back to the board. They can come back to the leadership and say, well, this is what I found out after the last 3 months of conversations that I've had with people. This is where I think we can go with the next step. Maybe we bring in an expert. Maybe we don't. Maybe we bring in an agency. Maybe we don't. Maybe we have the IT team own parts of this, right? So I think it starts with just put yourself out there, be vulnerable, and ask the smartest questions you can ask of the smartest people you can ask them of.
Love it.
And I think this is something that I do in all of my vendor interviews, and I highly recommend it, is at the end of the interview or at the end of the conversation, you've been asking different questions, you've been getting different answers, you've been responding. The last thing I always do in an interview is I ask, is there any question I should have asked you that I haven't? And what happens is that prompts that person to think of that thing that they went, they should have really asked me about blah. And you will get all sorts of gold nuggets out of that because the person who's asking you is going to be responding at that point is giving you a question in your best interests to ask them, and they'll just give you the data. So highly recommend that if you're diving into this, because you might not, like that thing that you just mentioned before about the data tools that already exist to be able to get you all the data, you might just not have any context on how to even ask that question because you had no idea it even existed. So that's a really pro tip when you're having a conversation with anyone. So I guess following my own tip, Jessica, what should we ask Jason?
Is there anything? Well, no, I don't want to ask that question.
For
No,
the
we'll,
next podcast,
we'll
is
save
there
that for the
anything
next.
we should
We'll
have
save
asked
that
you?
for the next. We'll save that for the next pod for sure.
That's
And
right.
and I'm sure
Yeah.
we'll make this a mini series. How about that?
Yes, we'll do a
A
mini
dramatic mini series.
I suppose we'll have to. Yeah, I think
We're
we're
gonna
going
let
to fit
Jessica
in
go to
at
bed.
least 10. Yeah. No, but Jason, thank you so much for letting us interview you and just hearing all about it. You two both geeking together about
Geeking
it.
out.
Yeah.
Geeking out, exactly. We will have you back on, but thank you again for your time, Michael. Again, thank you for your time.
No
And
worries.
My
we'll
pleasure.
see you next time.
Look forward
Thanks,
to it.
Jason.
Cheers, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jessica. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you had an awesome time, leaving you with ideas on how to improve your business and wow customers. If you'd like to leave a real customer's story, head to the link in our show notes and cuss away. Love the show? Please subscribe and leave a review because that enables us to help more businesses in building real relationships with customers and grow more rapidly. See you next time.